debates themselves. It was interesting when you said it was 3.5 hour speech just for one side of this. So what would be a typical situation? Would they start in mid-afternoon and go into the wee hours? Or?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah, in Lincoln's case, I have to go back and check exactly, but I'm pretty sure he was starting, around 2 o'clock or so. So, by the time he's finished, and then Douglas speaks for a couple hours, the audience has sat there for 5.5 straight hours without leaving, for the most part, without eating, and they do it because this was a chief form of entertainment. So politics was a great form of entertainment. At election time, people would gamble large sums of money. It's kind of like the Super Bowl. And you would support your team. If you were a Democrat, you would gamble in favor of the Democrats winning the election. And of course, just like you can gamble in many aspects of the Super Bowl, you could gamble on many aspects of the many election returns from different states, from different places, or the margin of difference in the election returns, right? Many things you could gamble on. And the young men would form into groups, and they would campaign together, they would do marches together. So this was an exciting kind of social activity, which partly explains why people would stand for so long listening to their champions. And I would say, furthermore, these were great speakers. Now, generally speaking, there was, even without great speakers, they stood for a long time to listen to politicians speak, but these were truly riveting speakers. There's many, many accounts of people just being profoundly affected by Lincoln's oratory and the powerful moral claims made upon them in the name of American nationalism, and the convictions that he articulated about the critical importance of ending slavery and of treating it as a moral evil. This spoke to people in pretty profound ways. It was not merely a question of divvying up the loaves and the fishes. This was not a question of mere patronage, right, or mere corruption, of which there was plenty like there is today. Lincoln was speaking to issues of profound moral concern to many Northerners. Now, many disagreed with him, of course, and didn't think slavery was an issue of profound moral concern, but those who did were very willing to try and make a political issue of it, and in fact, they would do so successfully in Illinois and throughout the nation by 1860, hence bringing on a civil war.
Would these two have the opportunity, we see in debates like a presidential debate today, which is what people would most often see, where they would actually have a bit of give and take on the spot. It sounds like they were both giving long speeches. During the other speech, would the other just sit there? Would they occasionally have an exchange? Or?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think one of the things that this new account that I found from the Missouri Republican shows vividly is that, in fact, there was quite a bit of exchange that usually doesn't make it into the records that historians have available to them. So there was a number of interruptions recorded by the Missouri Republican where Douglas would stand up and say, well, I don't agree with that, Mr. Lincoln, and I wish to correct the record on that, Mr. Lincoln. And then Lincoln would respond, and he responded several times with great humor. Once sort of denigrating himself, making the audience laugh, and once kind of denigrating Douglas and making the audience laugh as a way of sort of deflecting Douglas's criticisms. So this was a kind of a man's world, right? Politics was a man's world. Men could vote. It wasn't that women had no participation. Actually, a generation of scholars showed that women did participate more than we once thought. But still, primarily, this was a man's world, and sort of the success of bloodying your opponent, publicly humiliating him, conquering him, was an important part of this. And the exchanges could really contribute to a perception of victory by one man or the other, right? Not merely the set speech and the success of the argumentation, but the sense that one man was critiquing another, had mastered another, had put another down, could affect this sort of psychology of that moment, right? The collective perception that was so critical to those people going back and thinking about what had happened and who they supported. So yeah, I think that that's very interesting. It was just as sometimes you can see in, say, today's debates where, say, McCain might interrupt an Obama, and there's some tension sometimes between the two men, but in a more formal environment. This was even a less formal environment, right, where you could also try and interrupt or destabilize your opponent while he's speaking.
One last question. I'm just curious about the fact, obviously, some of the things you found for your article had been out there. It's sitting in archives or, I don't know, microfiche or something. Does that tell you there's more out there to enlighten us as far as the types of exchanges that took place, or is it becoming more and more rare to find these sorts of things?
Both, I think, really would be the honest truth. In some senses, we're finding a tremendous amount about Lincoln because there's been a huge effort over the past 20 years, most notably by the Lincoln Legal Project that's centered in Springfield, to go and find everything related to his legal career. Now there's a massive search in the National Archives for more Lincoln documents, and so there has been a tremendous amount of stuff that has been, sort of excavated out of county archives and national archives, that sometimes are in Lincoln's hand, other times documents to Lincoln, and these things do help flesh out our knowledge, and certainly this account is an example of that in a newspaper that typically hadn't been examined because it was a St. Louis newspaper, not an Illinois newspaper, where typically you would find reproductions of the speeches of Illinois politicians. So, on the one hand, we are finding more and more Lincoln material. On the other hand, at some point, historians will really have excavated all of the major remaining source materials, and you're simply not going to find that many more things. So this is a fairly rare find, to find a 30-page typescript Lincoln-Douglas debate, not a new debate. We still have some sources for this debate, but a new source of this debate is a pretty exciting thing.